I'm gonna just wait a little bit. Kingdom Builder is gonna live stream, and just want to make sure. He said he wanted me to wait a few seconds for everyone to make it to the middle of the world. I have a feeling Miss Milky Way, if I had to bet, she's lost somewhere on that mountain. So, Miss Milky Way, are you in the abandoned building over there?
I'm jumping down right now.
Okay.
Whoa. You coming to get me?
I would come pick you up on the bus, but it broke down.
It's fine.
Where are you at, Miss? There you go.
Oh, that
All
was a
right.
long walk.
Yeah, no one's ever gonna find this place if they just show up. So whatever. But I guess we'll get started. Kingdom, are you cool? Give me a up and down if you're good to go. I think that's a up and down, right? What about left and right? I wonder if you can hear me. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. We'll get started. Thanks, guys, for coming. Um, Last Sunday I think there was only Red Nails and who else was here? Kingdom Builder. I think that was it, but we did it anyway. There might have been someone else, but I doubt it. But the world I did have built, it glitched out and we couldn't get to it, and so we just ended up doing something. I threw a bunch of stuff in Oasis and we did it. But you can check it on YouTube if you'd like. So yeah, so we're in the Minor Prophets, and we're in Zephaniah. And honestly, this one is one I haven't read much, but for whatever reason, I feel like I'm supposed to do this one. It only has 3 chapters. I'm gonna do part one and then part two next Sunday. Um, I don't know, man. There's some powerful stuff in here, but we'll get started. If you're joining on the live stream or watching YouTube later, we're Oasis Church VR, New Wave Church for digital explorers and creatives. You can join our Discord to learn more about us at oasisdiscord.org, and you can find out the other events and stuff we have going on. But anyway, so Zephaniah, he's the ninth. We're on number nine. Of the 12 minor prophets, and the minor prophets doesn't mean that they're minor, like the minor league. They're just short, but they still have a lot of substance. And so, the 12, the minor prophets are in the Old Testament, and the name Zephaniah, it means in Hebrew the Lord hides, or the Lord has hidden, and which is kind of cool. So a lot of these prophets and a lot of people, Bible characters, kind of their names kind of give them away sometimes. Sometimes they're like, it just says something prophetically about them. And so it used to be quite common for parents to give their children, like I said, names that carried some prophetic significance for their lives. Um, and so it's pretty interesting. And so Zephaniah lived during the same time as Jeremiah and Habakkuk, which if you were here last Sunday, that's very hard to pronounce. And so he's actually the great grandson of the good king Hezekiah. And Hezekiah has an interesting story because he was gonna like die, I believe, and he wanted some more time to live. And I believe God was like reversed the clock, like the clock actually reversed, and he like gained life. And Zephaniah's prophecies they took place while Josiah was the king of Judah. And man, I love Josiah. He was hardcore. And he became king in 639 BC at the age of 8 years old. And he ruled until 609 BC. And he died, I think, in his early 40s, maybe like 41. But Josiah was king at 8 years old. Imagine that. Imagine being anointed to be king at 8. It's pretty wild. And he was hardcore because he found no one was worshiping God. No one was reading the Bible at the time, which was the Torah or the first few books in the Old Testament. And they found it in the walls of the temple because his lineage, Manasseh and all these guys were just pagan worshipers, and it was buried inside the walls, and they exposed it. And he's like, "What the heck are we doing?" And he went hardcore and just started killing all the pagan temples and killing these people and these idol worshippers and burning their bones and taking the dust of their bones and desecrating their temples. And he wreaked havoc. And he was real passionate. He was one of the good kings, though. But the 10 northern tribes had already been scattered many years before Zephaniah's ministry, with Assyria having captured the northern kingdom, just to give you some context where we're at. And so basically over a century has passed, and now God was prepared to bring judgment upon Judah. And if you know, they both split. Judah's the southern kingdom. And so due to Josiah's reforms, the downfall of Judah was kind of like postponed until shortly after his reign. And so we'll start off in Zephaniah 1. Um, and if anyone wants to read this, just go ahead and read it. And if you don't, I'll read it. I'll give you guys a few seconds. If not, I don't really care. I'll read it.
It says, I will sweep away everything from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will sweep away both man and beast. I will sweep away the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea and the idols that cause the wicked to stumble. When I destroy all mankind on the face of the earth, declares the Lord, I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against all who live in Jerusalem. I will destroy every remnant of Baal worship in this place, the very names of the idolatrous priests, those who bow down on the roofs to worship the starry host, those who bow down and swear by the Lord, and who also swear by Molech, those who turn away from following the Lord and neither seek the Lord nor inquire of him. Be silent before the sovereign Lord, for the day of the Lord is near. The Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated those he has invited. On the day of the Lord's sacrifice, I will punish the officials and the king's sons and all those clad in foreign clothes. On that day, I will punish all who avoid stepping on the threshold, who fill the temple of their gods with violence and deceit. On that day, declares the Lord, a cry will go up from the fish gate, wailing from the new quarter, and a loud crash from the hills.
Awesome. So that's 1 through 10. And then I'll read the next one here in a minute. So it says in verse 1, which like, keep in mind, the book starts off this way. It's like, I will sweep away everything from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will sweep away both man and beast. I will sweep away the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea and the idols that cause the wicked to stumble when I destroy all mankind on the face of the earth, declares the Lord. And so Zephaniah went straight to it. There's no little, how's everyone going? It's kumbaya kind of stuff. It's just right into it. And he delivered the Lord's message with a warning of severe and total judgment that would engulf everything in its path. And so God was very angry with those that have been unfaithful. And it's a time when desolation reigns all around. And Zephaniah's prophecy is primarily centered on the end times, especially the day of the Lord. And so it says in verse 4, it says, I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against all who live in Jerusalem, and I will destroy every remnant of Baal worship in this place. The very names of the idolatrous priests, those who bow down on the roofs to worship the starry host, those who bow down and swear by the God, who also swear by Moloch. And so now God turned his attention to his people in the land of Judah, having previously mentioned the whole earth. He's like, I'll wipe away the whole earth. I'll just sweep it all away. It's kind of reminding me of like Noah stuff. I'm done. That's kind of crazy. You think about Noah. He's just like, I'm gonna destroy this whole place. I'm done with this creation I created. And then he sees Noah. He sees one righteous person. But I'm getting sidetracked. So throughout the history of Judah and Israel, the false god Baal has made its way into the religious practices. You can't serve two masters, unfortunately. And God's people were also involved in pledging their allegiance to both the Lord and the Moloch. And if you're familiar with Moloch, Moloch's rituals involve acts like child sacrifice, astrology, and temple prostitution. And the Moloch statue would get so hot. It was, I don't know what metal it was made out of, but you put the baby on there and it would just singe it and kind of burn it. It was some demonic stuff. And so you can see how detestable this would be to God. And it says in 2 Kings 17:16-17, they forsook all the commands of the Lord their God, and they made for themselves two idols cast in the shape of calves and an Asherah pole. They bow down to the starry host, and they worship Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination, and they sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. So in verse 7, it says, be silent before the sovereign God, for the day of the Lord is near. The Lord has prepared a sacrifice. I love this part. He has consecrated those he has invited. And on that day of the Lord's sacrifice, I will punish the officials and the king's sons and all those clad in foreign clothes. And so in verse 7, God calls for silence. He's putting an end to protest and excuses for everyone being unfaithful. And the judgment is like a sacrifice God has planned, where Judah is actually the offering. And the Babylonians are the guest who would destroy the nation, much like an animal sacrifice in the temple. And so in verse 8, Zephaniah lists 7 groups facing God's judgment, starting with the princes, including judges, magistrates, aristocrats, and the king's court. And all these leaders are just, they're just as bad. They're corrupting everyone as well. And so these leaders of Judah rebel by adopting foreign clothing. And you're wondering what that means. It's indicating they have embraced the customs of their godless neighbors in Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon. And so in verse 10, it says, and I think is 10 on there? Yeah. On that day, declares the Lord, a cry will go up from the fish gate, wailing from the new quarter, a loud crash from the hills. Well, you who live in the market district, all your merchants will be wiped out. All who trade with silver will be destroyed. And so the fish gate is an old gate on the eastern wall near the Gihon Spring. It's kind of where the living water was from, but Jesus was the living water. And that's where folks used to sell fish, sometimes even on the Sabbath, because they got greedy. And the enemy would target this gate and break through it, and this would trigger a loud cry, it says, possibly from the attackers, the Chaldeans or the Babylonians, as they storm through it. And so I'm going to read the next one here, and then we'll head on to the other one. When I get to the next stuff, there's some real relevant stuff. It's blew my mind away after this. Well, you who live in the market district, all you merchants will be wiped out. All who trade with silver will be destroyed. At this time, I will search Jerusalem with lamps and punish those who are complacent, who are like wine left on its dregs, who think the Lord will do nothing, either good or bad. Their wealth will be plundered, their houses demolished. Though they build houses, they will not live in them. Though they plant vineyards, they will not drink the wine. The great day of the Lord is near and coming quickly. The cry on the day of the Lord is bitter. The mighty warrior shouts his battle cry. That day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom. Jeez. A day of clouds and blackness, a day of trumpet and battle cry against the fortified cities and against the corner towers. I will bring such distress on all people that will grope about like those who are blind, because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood will be poured out like dust, and their entrails like dung. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to save them on that day of the Lord's wrath. In the fire of his jealousy, the whole earth will be consumed, for he will make a sudden end of all who live on the earth. And so this is all heavy, but that's why we're doing part 2, because it does get kind of happy. This is just the Lord, he's jealous. And so in verse 12, it says, at that time I will search Jerusalem with lamps and punish those who are complacent, who are like wine left on dregs. You're probably wondering, what does that mean? But yeah, and I had to figure it out too. And Zephaniah explains why the people in Jerusalem were spiritually kind of down. It's like when you leave a bottle of wine sitting during that time without shaking it for a long time, the stuff at the bottom settles and it doesn't taste as good. And so when wine is left undisturbed, it means things are going well. So good wine gets better, but bad wine gets even worse. And it's kind of an analogy. And I think 17's, behind me, it says, I will bring such distress on the people that they will grope about like those who are blind. And so the reason for this judgment is that people have sinned against Yahweh. And they think about it, they're like stumbling around like they're blind, totally lost in the dark. It's like they're all confused and wandering around because of their sins. And that's what happens when you start sinning. You get confused and kind of delusional and stuff. And so these vivid pictures really drive home the point that consequences are coming their way for rebelling against God. And so now I can get rid of this. I guess I'll just leave it there. Doesn't really matter. And we'll go into Zephaniah 2, and then we'll end it. Anyone want to read this one here? If not, I will. Zephaniah 2 behind me. Do a backflip and give me some hearts if you do want to read it. If not, I'll just read it. If no one does, then there you go.
I can read it. Gather together, gather yourselves together, you shameful nation, before the decree takes effect and that day passes like wind-blown chaff, before the Lord's fierce anger comes upon you, before the day of the Lord's wrath comes upon you. Seek the Lord, all you humble of the land. You will do what he commands. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be sheltered on the day of the Lord's anger. Philistia for Gaza will be abandoned and Ashkelon left in ruins. At midday, Ashdod will be emptied and Ekron uprooted.
Awesome, thanks. And so there's some wild stuff on this one. And so after urging the people of Judah to repent and avoid judgment, the prophet Zephaniah went on to predict the destruction, basically, of Judah's neighboring nations. And so Ashkelon sounds like some place from like Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you'll be able to find it on Google Maps. Is the oldest and largest seaport in ancient Canaan, and it was located on the Mediterranean coast, and it's just north of the Gaza, and it's about 36 miles south of the modern day place called Tel Aviv. And so, according to Zephaniah, it's going to be completely deserted. And so Ashdod, situated midway between Joppa and Gaza, about 3 miles from the coast, is now identified by scholars as modern Tel Shaddad, which I don't even know where that's at, but you can Google it. And so as for Ekron, it was the northernmost of the major Philistine cities. And so during Israel's conquest, Joshua didn't conquer Ekron in Joshua 13:3. When the land was divided among the 12 tribes, Ekron was the first given to Judah and later to Dan. And so, like I said, these are probably be hard to find on Google Maps. But what's pretty wild as I go on to these, God kind of, like if you think about current events and what's said in the next one, it's pretty interesting. It says, let's see where we're at. Yeah, we're at the next one here. So I'm going to read the one that's above the bus here. And it says, woe to you who live by the sea, you Kerithite people. The word of the Lord is against you, Canaan. Land of the Philistines, he says, I will destroy you, and none will be left. The land by the sea will become pastures, having wells for shepherds and pens for flocks. That land will belong to the remnant of the people of Judah, where they will find pasture. In the evening, they will lie down in the houses of Ashkelon. The Lord their God will care for them. He will restore their fortunes. Moab and Ammon, I have heard the insults of Moab and the taunts of the Ammonites who insulted my people and made threats against their land. And so it's like predicting that the people in the land of the Philistines, check this out, which is like Canaan, are going to get some divine punishment. And so this is could be controversial, but this is the Bible. In modern relevant terms, it might mean that the Palestinians and their neighbors. And so in the returning Jews who've been in captivity are getting back the old Philistine coastline, including the Gaza Strip, which the Palestinians have now. And that's actually part of the promised land. This is what this is talking about. And I'm not saying to be controversial, but here's the thing. I have nothing against Palestinians or certain people. What I do, if it's God promised a land to certain people and God wants to do stuff, it's God. And so now the word Palestine isn't originally from that region. It actually goes back about 1900 years, and it comes from the Philistines, who weren't locals, but more ancient Greeks from the Aegean Sea. And they used to live along the coast, what's now the Gaza Strip, in Israel, but disappeared around the 6th century BCE. But here's the thing, the name Palestine didn't vanish. The Romans, in a rather arrogant move, they started calling the land of Israel Palestine centuries later, after they kind of crushed this Jewish uprising in 135 CE. And so basically they were trying to disconnect the people of God, the land of Israel, from the Jewish people. And so that's why they did it, kind of like a stab. And God plans to destroy the Philistine cities and give their land as a pasture to the remaining house of Judah. And so this is all prophetic. And so I'll go over to 9. I was going to ask the bus driver to give me a ride, but I don't think he's there anymore. Sorry. That was a bad joke. No, I'm joking. So verse 9, it says, "Therefore, as surely as I live, declares the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, surely Moab will become like Sodom, the Ammonites like Gomorrah, a place of weeds and salt pits, a wasteland forever. The remnant of my people will plunder them. The survivors of my nation will inherit their land. This is what they will get in return for their pride, for insulting and mocking the people of the Lord Almighty. The Lord will be awesome to them when he destroys all the gods of the earth. Distant nations will bow down to him, all of them in their own land. Cush, you Cushites too, will be slain by my sword." So he's talking about all these nations. This is prophetic stuff. Like, he's calling them out, and these nations are clearly around now. And so Moab and Ammon are in for total destruction. And just like what went down in Sodom and Gomorrah, there's no coming back from this. So if God's like, hey, this place will be kind of desolate, deserted, if he's like, you're going to be like Sodom and Gomorrah, it's not a good thing. So Genesis 19:23-26 says, "By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. And thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt." And so in the millennial kingdom, according to the prophet Zechariah in Zechariah 14:16, people from all over the world will worship the Lord Jesus when he comes back. And those who survive the conflicts in Jerusalem will come each year to honor the King, the Almighty Lord, and join in celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. And this is in Zechariah. And this would even include remnants of ancient nations like Moab and Ammon. So somehow the remnants of them will even come worship. I heard one pastor say that even the demons will confess that Jesus is Lord. Like, they may not be followers, but everyone will. And so Cush, whatever that means, you probably don't know any Cushites, but they will be slain by the sword, it says. And so the land of Cush is mentioned in Scripture, and it's often connected to the region of Ethiopia. And so, which is located in basically the south of Egypt. And in some English translations of the Bible, you'll find Ethiopia used instead of the Hebrew word Cush. And so basically this is stuff that he's saying is going to happen to these nations. So verse 13 says, "He will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria," which That's kind of given at Syria, leaving Nineveh utterly desolate and dry as the desert. Flocks and herds will lie down there, creatures of every kind. The desert owl and the screech owl will roost on her columns. Their hooting will echo through the windows. Rumble will fill the doorways. The beams of cedar will be exposed. This is the city of the revelry that lived in safety. She said to herself, I am the one, and there is none beside me. What a ruin she has become, a lair for wild beasts. All who pass by scoff and shake their fist. So the word hand, it symbolizes power and strength. And it's like, I'll stretch out my hand. And it usually means they're ready to take action, often in a hostile way sometimes. Exodus 15:12 says, you stretch out your right hand and the earth swallows your enemies. And so Nineveh, which is modern day Tel Kajavik, whatever that is, sits by the Tigris River about 600 miles north of the Persian Gulf in northern Iraq. Let's just say it's like northern Iraq. And it's predicted to become as dry as a desert, suggesting that something will happen to make Nineveh, kind of like Iraq, barren and parched. And Assyria, we know Syria basically, would end up losing its urban population. Kind of like what we see here. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic scene. And all kinds of animals would take over what was once a proud Assyria. And it's kind of like what was predicted for Philistia, where buildings would be abandoned and become homes for birds. So it's talking about all these birds it's like there'll be nothing there. And the indigenous Assyrian homeland includes parts of northern Iraq, southeastern Turkey, northwestern Iran, and northeastern Syria. So God's real clear on kind of what he's doing in the scene. And that's the wild thing about the prophets and the prophetic stuff. There's no surprises. He's kind of going to be kind of clear on all he's going to do. And so in the Old Testament, you can find, I'll go back over to the bus because it's kind of fun. Let's just go in the bus. Why not? I'm your bus driver. So when I was not saved and I was a kid in high school, and I think he rode in the same bus as me. I used to throw Skittles at kids' heads in the bus driver's head from the very back seat, and that's not very Christian to me, but I just wasn't a good kid. But so in the Old Testament, you can find 17 mentions of God's outstretched arm. And this phrase in Hebrew, Basora, the Hebrew phrase Basora, as God promises that he would rule with a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out or completed. And so, yeah, sometimes he does outstretch his arm, and there's consequences to it. But also, he does it also, it's filled with loving kindness when he reaches out his arms to us to extend his arm to show grace and rescue us through Jesus. And I'll end with this psalm, and then we'll go into worship. Psalm 136, and then we'll go to part 2 of this because it's actually a lot more cheery. There's a good part of this. I know this is all like end of the world stuff, but he's calling out like Palestine. He's calling out Syria, Iraq. This is like current. It's crazy. It blows my mind away. And so in Psalm 136, it says, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of gods. His love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord of lords. His love endures forever. To him who alone does great wonders, his love endures forever. Who by his understanding made the heavens, his love endures forever. Who spreads out the earth upon the waters, his love endures forever. Who made the great lights, his love endures forever. The sun to govern the day, his love endures forever. The moon and the stars to govern the night, his love endures forever. To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt, his love endures forever, and brought down Israel out from among them, his love endures forever. And then the outstretched arm part, 12. With a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, his love endures forever. To him who divided the Red Sea as under, his love endures forever, and brought Israel through the midst of it, his love endures forever, but swept Pharaoh and his army into the Red Sea, his love endures forever. I need like a beat for this. To him who led his people through the wilderness, his love endures forever. To him who struck down kings, his love endures forever, and killed mighty kings, his love endures forever. Sion, king of the Amorites, his love endures forever. And Og, king of Bashan, probably butchering that, his love endures forever. And gave their land as an inheritance, his love endures forever. Inheritance to his servant Israel, his love endures forever. He remembered us in our low estate. His love endures forever, and freed us from our enemies. His love endures forever. He gives food to every creature. His love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of heaven. His love endures forever. We'll just end there on a good note, and then we'll go to part two, which will be, it's only 3 chapters. One, we just did 1 and 2, and then we'll end on 3 next Sunday. Looking for the bus driver, but I think it may be the end of the world, and so he may have maybe in heaven or somewhere. But we'll go into worship. Here it is, right here. We'll end there. Oh man, you can only do this kind of stuff in VR. It's too much fun when it works. But yeah, thanks for coming, guys. I really enjoy doing this, and this is just all about worshiping God for real. That's it. That's it. It's about worship. This is God's word, and it's awesome. And that's all I can say. And if you don't know Jesus and you're watching, online and stuff, just come to some of these services. Come, keep watching, and he'll direct your paths. If you seek the Lord, He will definitely find you. He found me, and I was definitely way, way gone.